Hello, ma'ams and sirs, and thank you for tuning in to RP2 Vision. I'm Ronald Ray, your boy with a cornbread accent, and I think I've already mentioned before in another video, but I'll mention it again. I've been watching wrestling since 1985, and if you were a wrestling fan back then, living in Georgia, you were spoiled. So check this out on Saturday nights from 6:05 to 8:05 on WTBS Channel 17. You got to watch the stars of Jim Crockett Promotions NWA on a little show called World Championship Wrestling. After that, you will flip over to WATL Channel 36, catch the end of Bonnie Tyler's Holding Out for a Hero, and then you were joined by your host Joe Penasino, who later had a co-host named Bonnie Blackstone for Superstars of Wrestling that featured just different promotions. Mid South Wrestling that later became UWF, AWA, NWA, uh, an indie promotion in Georgia called Deep South Wrestling that was ran by the Assassin, Jody Hamilton. Then I think Penasino partnered up with Jerry Blackwell to form Southern Championship Wrestling from Georgia. So they quit showing Deep South and showed uh, Southern Championship Wrestling. And that would later become Georgia All Star Wrestling. Then it morphed into other things, I believe. Anyway, they also had Continental Wrestling from Alabama, World Class Wrestling from Texas. Basically, just different promotions uh, from 8 o'clock to 3 a.m. in the morning. So that's right there. That's 14 hours of wrestling you got to watch just on Saturday night. Not to mention the syndicated shows from WWF and the NWA, and I think even on uh, WXIA Atlanta Channel 11 at 11 o'clock. For a while there, they had International Championship Wrestling. Uh, that was that wasn't a Papa ran promotion. That was Savoldi, Angelo Savoldi, I believe, up north. Uh, you'll catch that sometimes. But anyway, sorry, I digress. Uh, and one of the promotions I will highlight on Superstars of Wrestling was the CWA out of Memphis, Tennessee, which we just always called it, Memphis Wrestling. Had a good show. One of my favorites, definitely, along with Continental Wrestling. UWF is probably my favorite. But anyway, this is little studio, and always there's always something happening. Multiple things happening, multiple brawls happening, uh, title changes, highlights from the previous Monday night at the Mid South Coliseum, the hype for the Mid South Coliseum Monday show. This, like I said, a lot of different things going on. And so when I seen Vice had a new show called Tales from Territory, made by the same people who did Dark Side of the Ring, I was a little skeptic. Um, I mean, I did like Dark Side to a point. Um, anyway, I'm not going to digress too much into that. But but then when I seen the first, it got my interest. Then when I seen the first episode was going to be Memphis Wrestling, I I had to just check it out. And since I did check it out, why not come to my little channel here and talk about it? So here we go. And it's funny to me anyway that they would call this Memphis where wrestling was real. I don't know about a lot of you people, but I got while I watch shoot interviews, and one of the things they you would notice is when a wrestler was like leaving Memphis and going to work for somebody like Bill Watts or Ole Anderson, uh, they would tell the wrestlers that, hey, I don't want to see none of that Tennessee bullshit. Uh, so it's definitely kind of funny seeing that they call this, Memphis where wrestling was real. But but we got the round table here with Jerry and Jeff Jarrett, Jerry Lawler, Jimmy Hart. Say all those names fast, real fast 5 times, and I can't even say it once. Dirty Dutch Mantel, Bad Mother. Maybe I retell that story. It's a Ricky Morton story, and you see there where they talk about where they promote Jarrett Promotions, where they ran at. Uh, Ran Memphis, of course, Nashville, Louisville, Kentucky. I also believe Evansville, Indiana, parts of Arkansas. Yeah, you just see the highlights right there from the studios. I mean, blood, brawls, uh, crazy people like Joe Ledoux. There's a highlight from a Memphis show there. See, there's Jimmy Hart getting beat up, and there's somebody getting pulled out. And there's a title, Memphis, where wrestling was real. Lance Russell and Dave Brown was your host. And they said, let's see, they show the picture. See, there's a roundtable discussion. I like that format, but they about to highlight it right here, and they show footage of Billy Travis getting arrested. And from what I heard, that was very real. Yeah, there's this anyway. Sorry, I digress. That sign says, "Personal issues draw money." Sometimes, sometimes fiction can be a whole lot of reality. But as they're about to show here, you're going to see there it is right there with Travis being arrested at the studio. And from what I heard, the police really did come to the studios in Memphis and arrest Billy Travis. Apparently, he had a little problem paying the child support, and that's why he got arrested. And right here, they're talking about the infamous pulling of the strap. And when Jerry Lawler pulled that strap down, it meant business. That was probably in contrast. That was kind of like, I don't know if any you people ever watched the TV show Incredible Hulk or the Avengers movie with a Hulk in it. When Bruce Banner would eyes would change, that's when he would turn into the Hulk and business would pick up. Same thing with here. Jerry Lawler would just have enough. He pulls that strap down, becomes Super Lawler, and starts beating the stew out of his opponents, as Lance Russell will say. I loved Lance Russell's commentary. I mean, it was just so good at the time. But yeah, and they also highlight here. See, there he is, laying out Eddie Gilbert. There's the Dirty Dutchman, Dutch Mantel. If you ever get a chance to listen to his podcast or anything, or any interviews with him, he tells really good stories. Uh, but yeah, there's Lawler biting down a turnbuckle. And right here, that's where Jerry Jarrett mentions that a lot of superstars came from there. You just seen Bid Scott Hall. Like I said, I think he said between 90%, 95% of a lot of the top talent either started or at least came through Memphis. Hello, ma'ams and sirs. Top talent like Rick Rude. And I believe uh, Memphis is where Rick Rude became ravishing. You also had a young Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, the Midnight Rockers. And of course, this is way before Shawn Michaels became the Heartbreak Kid. And also, you see there's the Nasty Boys, who became big stars as a tag team. The Rock and Roll Express, Ricky Morton and Robert Gibson was formed in Memphis. by Jerry Lawler as a kind of a younger version of the Fabulous Ones. Uh, Basically, the Fabulous Ones were for the older ladies, and Rock and Roll Express for the young ladies. Is what I've heard. Tommy Wildfire Rich got a big break in Memphis as well. In the picture, you see Sting and Rock. The This is when they first started calling themselves the Blade Runners. They came in as Steve Borden and Jim Hellwig, the Freedom Fighters, as big babyface tag team. Then they turned heel, changed the name to Sting, or could have been Flash and Rock, or it could have been Sting and Rock, uh, right here in Memphis. But this is when they first started calling themselves the Blade Runners before they went to the Mid South territory, which I think had turned to UWF at the time, and got under the tutelage of Eddie Gilbert. Hedwig, of course, didn't stay too long in Bill Watts' territory. Sting stayed in, and when was one of the talents the NWA picked up when they bought when Jim Crockett bought UWF. Sting became a big star there. Jim Hellwig became a Dingo Warrior, then grew up again and became the Ultimate Warrior. And basically, you see the start of two world champions right there in Memphis. And Mark Calloway, of course, we all knew him as the Undertaker, but at the time he was known as the Master of Pain. And I remember seeing him when I was a kid, and here's this big, 6'4", 6'5", 6'6". Forgot what his height is, but big dude. And if you did watch Memphis wrestling, uh, the ring looked kind of a little off, but it's it served its purpose. But here's this big dude here. I mean, look at him in this picture. He was big here. He had the agility to walk across the middle of the rope on the top rope, walk across the middle rope, and deliver a flying elbow drop. Later on, when he became an Undertaker, of course, he did what was called the old school. He, did a arm twist, walk to the top rope, walk to the middle, then as he's holding his opponent's arm, and delivered a forearm. But here it was just all him, walk across almost to the middle of the ropes, and deliver a flying elbow. And I thought that was like the coolest thing because uh, I kind of didn't catch a spoiler, and apparently the spoiler would do a lot of stuff like that. And watching old tapes, I seen a spoiler do some cool stuff off off the ropes, and like Gordon Solie would say, use the ropes to his advantage and all that. But the Undertaker, or I hear Master of Pain, and of course he did it when he was in the NWA or WCW, whatever you want to call it at the time. Uh, he would deliver the top rope elbow drop from the middle, walk across the ropes and deliver it before he did a heart punch. I kind of wish when he did go to the WWF and became the Undertaker, they still used a heart punch, but I guess the Tombstone did kind of fit his character more than a heart punch. And of course, another guy who went through Memphis is none other than Hulk Hogan himself. Um, he was in a program with Joe Lawler, and I don't think he got the best of that one like a lot of people did. But of course, he became one of the biggest draws in the history of the business. But he paid his dues. He went to Florida, Georgia, Japan, Memphis, AWA. He did his own. He had to pay his dues, but then he was in Rocky 3, and then went to Vince McMahon, and the rest of the say is history. Now, fans back then were emotionally invested, to say the least. So it'll be no surprise at all for one of these fans who were boozed up to come in the ring and help their favorite wrestler uh, get the upper hand, especially if the heel was cheating. Come on. Of course, here they have a funny story where Jimmy Hart got a shot with a blow dart in his tush. Uh, then, of course, Lawler took care of that fan outside the arena, and that brings up another point too. Wrestlers had to be tough back then. Uh, for one, because they didn't want to get beat up by a fan. They had to take care of themselves, and that age of kayfabe, um, for one, they had to protect the business. A lot of promoters, a lot of uh, these guys who own territories, if you get in a fight with a fan out in public and lose, you would get fired. I remember watching Bill Watts' shooter interview a long time ago, back when DVDs were first coming out, but I still have the VHS, VCR, uh, have it on VHS. Anyway, he said, if you're a wrestler, you went out public and got a fight with a fan and lose, he would fire you. And he admitted that there was one time one of his top, I don't think it was one of his top hands or somebody he liked, I guess, got in a fight with a fan and looked at his face and looked at his hands and literally said it looked like he was catching punches instead of throw punches. You got to go. Um, so that was they didn't play when it came to that, and of course, uh, as it showed here too, it's like some of the local authorities would drag a fan back to the back and let the wrestlers deal with them, and some of these promoters will help out too. It's like, look, and bookers, bookers are like, hey, here's my angle I booked you in to draw this heat, to draw this emotional hate for you, uh, and you're especially when you be at one of their favorite wrestlers, like at the time of Jerry Jarrett or Jerry Lawler, uh, Ricky Morton. I mean, the stories you hear about, the fans want to I mean, I'm talking about all fans, not just women, even a guy, male fans. I guess I seen Ricky and Roberts like a little brother, or little brother, excuse me. Um, so the male fans would be like, hey, Midnight Express or whoever, you're cheating there. I'm going to get in there and take care of you myself. But no, the bookers would actually say, when they bring back to the bag, they, smack the fan around and help out the heels that they put heat on uh, in these fights, because, hey, I'm sort of responsible for you getting the seat and you did what I asked. So I've got to help you. Um, but of course, little, Jimmy Hart, 100 pounds, soaking wet, he's not going to hit nobody, especially somebody big as he is. But I do remember at the time there was a big feud with Tommy Rich and Austin Idol versus it was just Jerry Lawler, and Jerry Lawler would bring a tag team partner uh, almost every couple of weeks. One a week or two would be Nick Bockwinkel, a week or two would be um, Bam Bam Bigelow. Um, name it. I think him and Bill Dunny finally finished the deal. But anyway, there was this cage match they set up, hair versus hair, or hair versus hair. And the way their cage was designed, it was almost like the Hell in a Cell you see in the WWE, except for no roof. It was just surrounded one big cage surrounded the ring. So it's supposed to be a hair versus hair. Also, Aloe even uh, did a go home promo saying, "Look," and Austin Idol was a great promo guy at the time. Uh, but he said, "Look, I promise you a refund if I lost. So fans, packed the arena because they thought Jerry Lawler never loses a hair versus hair match. He's got to get that, and all that mess. And it's in a cage. Everybody's got to be out. No way, no interference. Jerry Lawler's going to win. But here comes the finish. Of course, Jerry Calhoun, who's I think ref every match on TV. I think Paul Morton, Ricky Morton's dad, would referee sometimes, especially in the arena shows, house shows. I think once or twice on TV, but I just can't remember. Um, anyway, Calhoun gets bumped. Lawler has idle down, ready to pin him, but all of a sudden, here comes somebody coming out the bottom of the ring, and it's Tommy Rich. So Tommy Rich, they come in, they post him again where they, uh, spread Jerry Lawler's legs and ram him crotch first into the ring post. I mean, that's how the the angle started. But anyway, they post him, pile drive him. Calhoun makes a 3 count. Idol wins. Lawler loses his hair. Uh, and speaking of guys who got their breaks, or finally got noticed, was Paulie Dangerously. He was their manager. Of course, Paulie Dangerously, Paul Heyman. Um, but yeah, they. If you watch the match, I will try to remember. This is one of the things I'll try to remember to share a link on the YouTube page on the bottom. Um, you can see a fan basically scaling the top of the cage. I don't think they got in, but they almost got in. I know one foot was over, but they had to get police escort Austin Idol, Tommy Rich, and Paulie Dangerously out of the arena. But fans were real rapid. They were, like I said, I don't know if any of people watch Walking Dead, but this is where I kind of I'm trying not to go off on too much of a tangent. But you know how people were like so emotionally involved when Negan appeared in Walking Dead and he kills. Sorry if you ain't watched it. He kills Glenn, and Glenn was like, you know, basically the Ricky. He went the top babyface, but he was the Ricky Morton. He was the workhorse, and fans loved him. And but Negan winds up killing him, and there were people supposedly literally crying about that online, and uh, I forgot the act Jeffrey something. I forgot the actor's name, but I think he did a show one time where I think people on Twitter or emailed him or something like that on some kind of message board on the Walking Dead, like wanted to kill the actor, kill Negan, or the actor who plays Negan, uh, for killing Glenn. I mean, that's how rapid fans of pro wrestling were back then. Um, and like I said, wrestlers had to be tough. They had to know how to take care of themselves. Uh, kind of like when Rollins got attached by that fan a while back. Uh, First of all, back then, if there was a ref there, I mean, even like '90s, I think, late '90s, I think there was a fan uh, during a Nitro show ran to the ring, and freaking Brian Hildebrand you know kicked him and punched him a few times. Um, but yeah, refs would like even refs would like kick him and stuff, kick the fan or whatever, and even if like the fan did tackle Rollins down, you know, at the time it feels back in those days, even in the '80s, he would better know how to get back up and get on a top position and be able to beat the crap out of this guy. But when Rollins went back on, I guess there was somebody who interviewed him, he asked Seth Rollins about it. So he was scared or petrified, which yeah, I'm pretty sure anybody would who's getting attacked. But he, these old promoters, they would have fired Seth Rollins for going to the public saying he was scared. But I'm pretty sure there's a lot of things they can't do now because lawsuits. But yeah, wrestlers had to be tough back then. Now here's an interesting story of the Mario Galento and Jerry Jarrett incident. Pretty interesting to me because I never heard of this story before. So this segment did keep me intrigued, and it definitely gives you an explanation of how tough things were back then. Basically, Roy Welch, who had early dementia at the time, I think it said here, or early Alzheimer's, thought that Jerry Jarrett was just trying to take over the company. So he sent Mario Galento to take care of Jerry Jarrett. Um, Now, Roy Welch, back in his heyday in the 1940s, uh, like I said, a lot tougher back then than it was now. And Ron Fuller on his Studcast podcast told a story of where Roy Welch would basically uh, go into a town, go to where they was having a show, hit the locker room and ask the wrestlers, "Hey, who's booking this? Whose promotion is it? Whose territory is this?" And the wrestlers would tell Welch where the promoter was, and Roy Welch would just go in there and bam, boo, pow, zing. Um, then come in and tell the wrestlers, "Hey, this is my territory now. Uh, this is how things are going to go." Basically, went in there and would strong arm take over a territory. Another side note about Mario Galento was 10 back in 1974, 10 years before the 2020 expose on pro wrestling. He did an interview for a Tennessee radio station exposing the business and trying to, you know, selling his. I think he was trying to run a pro wrestling school and he was running a town or whatever. But that's a little brief history on Galento as well. And I'll try to let me say that too. I'll try to uh, share the interview I just talked about. But anyway, he went in the ring where Jerry Jarrett was facing Jerry Lawler. Jarrett was, of course, the babyface, Lawler the heel. Galento comes in, blindsides Jarrett, and Jarrett, who was trained and definitely was trained to defend himself, and as he explains here, uh, he basically goes up and pulls his eye out. Uh, and Galento, try to fight back, and here's Lawler, the heel decides to help Jarrett. And of course, Lawler definitely knew who he was, or at least right there had an instinct to get on the mic and say, "Hey, I didn't, do this because I like Jerry Jarrett. I did it because the only person that's going to beat up Jerry Jarrett is me." Basically trying to put the heat back on himself. But then it goes into where uh, Glento, I forgot the time frame here, but they the wound's healed, and he comes back into a town they're wrestling at, and comes in and attacks Jerry Lawler. And of course, Glenta this time has a blade on him, and they scuffle a little bit. Lawler leaves the ring, goes to the back, and says, "Hey, Mario's out to get me. He has a blade. He has a blade." And I guess looking for him, uh, Jimmy Valiant had a 357. That's what they described on here, in his bag, and pulls it on Galento. And this goes back to what I was saying before. It wouldn't be too much of a surprise that, especially in the Hill locker room, a few of the Hills had guns in their bag and on them because, you know, like I said, pants were very passionate and rapid at the time. But like I said, I like this little story, and it was very interesting. This kind of tells you how things were different back then, and how a little rough things were back in those days as compared to now. Now I definitely remember uh, this angle right here. Here's the infamous uh, Jerry Lawler getting hit by Eddie Gilbert angle they did on TV. This is part of the some of the wild stuff they would have on their program. But you see, Eddie Gilbert just put the boots on to or the tennis shoes, kick Eddie Marlin, and oh, and I remember being a kid and seeing this like, oh crap, what the heck? Looked over to my mom. I said, hey mom, you told me wrestling is fake. Explain this. And of course, my mom was like, well, son, in another 8 years, they'll have shooting interviews and they'll tell you how they did it. Okay, that's not how my mom talked. I can't really do a mom impression right now, but and of course she didn't tell me that last line. She just didn't say anything. But now here was a scary dude, Joe Ledoux, the Canadian strongman, and this guy he scary, strong looking, and can move. Uh, Now I don't know how they did that part. I was according to this, that was a shoot. They could really do that. Anyway, I had to jump back to uh the car angle where JLR gets hit by a car. Supposedly that was actually Brian Lee's car, and that Lawler actually busted the windshield. So I don't know if anybody remembers Brian Lee. Brian Lee is kind of a big boy. I don't think I want to sit there and say, "Hey, can we use your car for an angle?" and then bust the windshield. But I'm pretty sure Lawler bombed a new windshield, maybe. But that's just And look at this, dang, this throws him over. And Lawler right here even admits that he kind of screwed up right there, where he grabbed the rope before he went out. Otherwise, he thinks he would have cleared it and hit the top of the table. But like I said, they had at the time they had some interesting characters at the time. It was definitely definitely more fun to watch at at that in those days than some of the stuff they have now. And I know you young people be like, boomer. Yes, I've gotten to that age where music, movies, all of entertainment was better back in my day. And sometimes I think even before my day than it is now. But that's it's all subjective. Now this right here, if I remember it, I probably try to erase it from my mind because this I would not be a fan of. And of course, before they kind of speak on this, Dirty Dutch talking about wrestling in front of a prison one time. Um, that had to be interesting, but this is definitely wouldn't be up my alley. If you think having a symphony play for or play with along with Metallica or Kiss or just any rock band is far fetched, here we have a symphony as background music for a wrestling match. Um, like I said, I don't remember. It's interesting, but it's kind of funny that Dutch got one of musicians involved, and this had to be, I guess, closer to 90, because you can see right here Jeff was getting a little more muscled up here. If you see Jeff Sher as a rookie, he was, I think his starting weight was, when his first match was like 175, 200 pounds, and they build him as that weight. So yeah, here Jeff is bulked up a little bit, so it might have been 89, 90 maybe. I could be wrong. Like I said, if I did see this, I definitely trying to erase this from my mind, because I probably turned it off. I was like, okay, I'll find something else for a few minutes while this crap is going on, because this would not be this was not up my alley. That's kind of the reason I didn't watch WWF, now WWE, at that time, because you had doinks and um, people I've seen in the territories come in and have different names. Yeah, you see what one of the musicians got. Yeah, there you go. Don't mess with me. I'm Dutch Mantel. Bad mother. Yeah, I gotta watch my language, because I don't know how YouTube feels about F bombs. I've seen people on YouTube, drop F bombs. But oh, there's a 3 count. Jeff wins. Big surprise. Oh, not mine. Jeff went too bad. He's a Hall of Famer now. But yeah, that it would not be in my wheelhouse to even care about what happened right then. So now we get a good Randy Savage story here. Now, I've actually heard this story a few times. A little backstory here. At one time, Angelo Poffo, the father of Randy Savage and Leaping Lanny Poffo, ran a promotion called International Championship Wrestling. And they ran, against the Memphis territory. I'll get that a little bit later, but anyway, they finally make it to Papo's promotion gets shut down, and they come to Memphis, and then Randy Savage gets a job for WWF, and rest is history. His brother tags along and becomes a genius. Anyway, yeah, here's a Waffle House story where a guy comes in. Just want to tell people that, hey, I got married. I'm happy for now. I'm going on my honeymoon. Going to get laid, and from what I heard, he was hungry and had no F's to give, especially for someone getting married. Yeah, I just don't care. Just want my double hash browns, gathered, covered, chunked, diced, and a grilled chicken. Yeah, 'cause I am the cream of the crop. Yeah. How'd that sound? That sound like a good Randy Savage impression? Anyway, they start fighting. One guy pulls a knife. Savage thinks he's got a knife, but as they tell, and this one, he realizes it's a butter knife, and cops show up. Other guy runs. Savage, I guess, was getting the better end of the police officers, and they said, "Okay, we're gonna sit the dog on you." And Savage, living up to his name, being Savage, just kept going, and they let the dogs on him, and apparently the dog got the better of Savage. I'm pretty sure even in the afterlife, Randy Savage probably still trying to hunt that dog down, want to make one more go around to it. Um, This episode, like I said, I like the format. Uh, just let the group sit there at a table and let them tell some stories, especially this group right here. I mean, I would love to be on a fly on the wall and just listen to them talk and tell stories. Um, I mean, especially rib stories. And the reason I didn't get into it, and because rib stories, you gotta let them tell you the story. You gotta either, yeah, you gotta let them tell the rib stories because they can tell it better than I could, better than I can repeat it. Uh, anyway, the rib story they do tell, the one where uh, Fargo reversed the rib on him to Jerry Jarrett and Jackie Fargo, or Jackie Fargo reversed the rib on Jerry Jarrett and yeah, who the other guy was, um, but yeah, Lawler stooged off to Fargo, which Fargo's the one that got him his break, got him in the business. Um, ultimately put him over as the top guy in the territory. And but yeah, I did like this. Uh, was a little surprised, somewhat, that they didn't go into the whole ICW CWA feud. Or I mean, I don't think they really went into that until Savage did come to Memphis territory and work for the Jarretts or Jarrett and Lawler. Um, but yeah, you had Randy Savage, Landon Poffo there. You had Bob Orton there, Ron Garman there. Uh, I think Bruce Crusher Broomfield, which later became the One Man Gang, which later became Akeem the African Dream. Uh, they all wrestled there, and they would uh, be on their TV saying, wanting to really fight Lawler or Dundee or Dutch or any of those guys. They want to legitimately, fight them. And I think there was like an incident between Bill Dundee and Randy Savage at a gym, and I think it was Bill Dundee pulled a gun on Savage. But like I said, I was kind of surprised I didn't go into that. But there's some pictures there, and they do there's a picture of Andy Kaufman right there at the end, which will lead up to episode number 2, which did go into the Andy Kaufman Jerry Lawler. And I'm gonna go ahead and just include the Andy Kaufman episode on this one, and just gonna briefly talk about it. And it was, I mean, it deserved its own separate episode. It was a big part of the Memphis territory. It definitely put them on the map, especially the mainstream map, because the David Letterman show. Kaufman was a up and coming, or probably I won't say I don't know how up and coming he was at the time, but was highly regarded being the one most talented comedians at the time. And he was, as it explains in this episode, he was a huge wrestling fan. And part of his comedy act was he was the intergender heavyweight champion of the world, and he would wrestle women, um, and of course beat them. So I guess when he's doing it in front of a comedy club, or a stage act, he's doing it in front of comedy fans, and he wanted to do it in front of wrestling fans and see how well it does. And apparently, he went to Vince Senior with it, being a kid from that the New York area. Uh, Definitely wanted to do his act up there for that promotion, but Vince Senior turned it down. We'll be interested if Vince Jr. would have turned it down, which would be an interesting question. Anyway, um, at the time, the story I heard was at the time he was roommates with Bill Apter. Bill Apter was the editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, Inside Wrestling, and The Wrestler, which now they're famously called the Aftermags. I used to have a huge collection of those. Would you know get them every month or every couple months when I could. Uh, Definitely went the dirt sheets. They kept kayfabe um, for the most part. There was a few times where, like at the time, I guess it wasn't on TV. It wasn't acknowledged that Vince McMahon owned the WWF. He was just a commentator. Um, but they exposed that yeah, he owns it. But anyway, after calls Jerry Jarrett. Um, I guess on here I think they said Kaufman calls Jerry Jarrett, who tells Kaufman to call Jerry Lawler. They plan it all out. He brings his show to the Mid South Coliseum, and of course he's the biggest. He instantly becomes the biggest heel there. Uh, Jerry Lawler being smart businessman. Jarrett too, being smart. It's like, oh yeah, let him do it a couple more times, and let's build up that heat. And it goes into where they introduce another lady, and she almost gets him, but not quite. But she gets a rematch with him, and um, this doesn't still doesn't win. And this is where Jared Lawler gets involved because he was in the ladies' corner. Then I think he smacks him or pushes him. Kaufman threatens Sue and all that other mess, and they decide to have a match, and the rest is the rest is history. Uh, they have a match. Lawler, does a back suplex on Kaufman, gives him a pile driver, which was illegal in Memphis. So technically, by DQ, Kaufman won. And he sold it, he was injured and all that mess. And uh, now I think one time they shot an angle where he had duped Lawler, saying, "Hey, uh, Jimmy Hart was supposed to, be my partner, but he failed, and now I'm gonna be with you, and let's go get him." And then he winds up turning on Lawler, and which kind of seen that coming. Um, but yeah, I mean, it was cool that he was a huge. I mean, this is one of the things that Memphis was a trendsetter because what happened after this was uh, what WrestleMania, and then I mean, granted, the WWF did get Mr. T, who looks like, especially at the time, he looked like he could definitely take care of himself. So uh, and of course, he was just a partner with Hulk Hogan against Paul Orndorff and Roddy Piper, and and everybody knows what happens there. Then there was other celebrity involvements. Of course, David Arquette being the worst. Uh, I guess we shouldn't really make fun of that. That was somebody else's fault, but like you see right here, this is one of Andy Kaufman's one of his famous promos. I'll definitely have to uh, share a couple of the promos he cut. And let's see. I'll see if I can find the Andy Kaufman incident or the excuse me David Letterman show incident too. But this was a good watch too. Like I said, both the episodes were pretty good. It definitely highlights where they were trendsetters. I mean, another thing that was a trendsetter at the time was uh, music videos. They would MTV was hot at the time, so somebody there was like, "Hey, won't we get highlights of people and put them to music?" And then before they come into the territory, I think they first did it with the Fabulous Ones, Stanley and Steve Kern. Before they wrestled one match in Memphis, they shot music style videos, which was it's cringe kind of watch now. Um, which I'm pretty sure they're definitely dated. Let's just say that. But before they even had a match, they were already over because these music videos they shot, and of course a lot of the other territories kind of missed out, copy that. They before the Rock Roll Express came up there, they did like a highlight uh video with music. Um, the Rock and Roll Express with music. Sorry, I got distracted there. And then as soon as they were there, they're instantly over. But like I said, I do highly recommend watching both of these episodes, especially if you're a fan of the Memphis territory. I think they already aired the third episode, which covers the AWA, which Memphis at one time was a developmental territory, or not development, just a territory, excuse me, of the A. First, it was part of the NWA. Then, I guess some disagreements. I, they really wanted to give Lawler a world title run, and I guess those in the NWA didn't think he could carry it. I guess then they partnered up to be a AWA territory, and of course it's they still kept the CWA, but the championships were called the AWA Southern title, the singles title, and the tag team titles were the AWA Southern titles, Southern tag titles, and Lawler was the, I don't know, 18, 20 sometime AWA Southern champion. And he finally did, I believe it was 1988. He finally won the AWA world title against Kurt Hennig, won it in Memphis. Then um, unified the AWA and World Class Heavyweight Championships at Super Clash 3, which I'm pretty sure they might talk about that in that episode, the AWA episode. And then um, I guess there was some arguments about money, and I guess Lawler. He explained it on TV where Lawler uh, took the sent the belt back there, and anyway, he was basically trying to cover up the disagreement that they're probably really no longer with the AWA uh, or world class at that for that matter. He's just he still called himself the unified world champion. Then I think was it the Von Erich sold to Jarrett, and that's when they formed the USWA. Uh, Texas and Memphis. Jarrett owned them both. Then this is better explained on the Jeff Jarrett podcast. Um, I think the Von Erich was threatening to sue or wanted to take back over, and you know Jerry Joe's like, fine, have the mess. They kept the USWA name. Then later on, I guess Jarrett retired and Lawler kept with it, and it was actually a developmental promotion for the WWE at one time. And at the time, they went under the name Memphis Pro Wrestling. Still had a studio, but now they were bringing in W. Even during the when it was USWA, they brought the like Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Lex Luger, Randy Savage came back, uh, Undertaker came back, and had a program with like a USWA versus WWE type deal. They also did Smoky Mountain Wrestling versus USWA, and like I said, it became Memphis Pro, and um, I think Brian Danielson wrestled a lot there. Can't remember who all came about there because we didn't have it on TV at the time. But it was definitely one of my favorite promotions. A lot of interesting angles. And actually, going back to the Roy Welch thing, they actually had a angle with Robert Fuller and Jeff Jarrett about that situation. Of course, they kept the, the incident with Mario Galento out of it, but Robert Fuller basically came on TV and said, "Hey, your dad, talking to Jeff Jarrett, your dad stole the territory from my father. This should be my territory now," and yada yada yada. Or it was my grandfather's. It should be mine. But that was an interesting feud. Lots of interesting feuds. Of course, Andy Kaufman, Jerry Lawler. Um, the first big one I know, I remember was of course the Austin Idol and Tommy Rich versus Jerry Lawler. Um, let's see. Uh, the upcoming, I mean, Jeff Jarrett, I'd pretty much seen him grow up. He started, I think it was 1920, um, was a referee, and and they had an episode where, Bill Dundee and Buddy Lando came in and, had their own desk, had their own, uh, logo set up, the Bill and Buddy show. And that, if you ever see that episode, that was pretty funny. And they wound up, attacking because Jeff Jarrett was a referee at the time, and they had, attacked him and ran a little angle with Jerry Jarrett. Tojo came back to the ring for a little bit. Then Jeff started wrestling. Remember a lot of him and Billy Travis tagging together a lot. Of course, the Jeff Jarrett and Robert Fuller feud was really good. Um, then later on, they shot an angle where the Moondogs came in and this ran roughshod against everybody. Uh, did a lot of ECW type stuff with trash cans and chairs. Not a lot of table. I mean, they brought a table in, of course, but they didn't do the fancy moonsaults and swantons or anything like that on the tables. Uh, but Jarrett's like, hey, I made a deal with the devil. And I promise this guy, if we ever lose, we'll just quit being a tag team. And out came Robert Fuller. It shot the crowd. I was like, I mean, it. And like I said, when fans were emotionally invested into it, like you would any other TV show, uh, you would see them like, wow, I can't believe they're teaming together. But oh, I'm actually showing commercials now. Probably shouldn't be. Hopefully, I don't get a. Hopefully, I don't do all this work and YouTube won't upload it. But hopefully, since I don't have sound to it, it won't be that big of a deal. But anyway, that was my retrospect of Memphis wrestling. Now I sound like a rookie Jeff Jarrett promo. Well, Lance, you know, that me and Billy Travis been working real hard in that gym, getting our moves right, and I can't believe Pat Tanaka and Paul Diamond they turn against me that way, and 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 form an alliance with Downtown Bruno. Uh, but I guarantee you one thing, Lance, we will get in that ring and take care of Bad Company, wherever they call them themselves now. Anyway, uh, see, I'm doing yeah, definitely seen Jeff Jarrett grow up. A lot of, Tracy Smothers was there for a while and left. Came back with Steve Armstrong. I guess he got hurt or something like that and left. And Tracy came back and teamed with John Paul, who just left AWA, formed the Mason Dixon connection, and they were okay. I actually thought Chris Champion and Mark Starr, which at the time I didn't know they were brothers. I didn't know we didn't have internet and dirt sheets or anything like that back when I was a kid. I think they were around, but you had to order them. So, and I never thought about ordering. I just didn't advertise and basically didn't care. I thought it was just another wrestling magazine, and but I thought the Team Wildside with Chris Champion and Mark Starr was pretty decent. They had a good feud with the Rock and Roll Express. Uh, Earlier, when I was talking about the Midnight Rockers, I think that's the first time Shawn Michaels and for that matter Mark Jannetty, I think, were heels because they brought them in to be. They called the Rock and Roll Summit. It was the Midnight Rockers against Ricky Morton, Robert Gibson, the Rock and Roll Express, and I guess they had a match and more people cheered for rock and roll, I guess, and they thought it'd be better to change Midnight Rockers healed and they were heel on TV and oh look at there's a young Jerry Calhoun. But yeah, that was a pretty good little program there. But anyway, I think I'll call it a day on this episode of uh, Tales of the Territory. Just my little retrospect, what I can remember off the top of my head, basically. But yeah, definitely like this program. Even though like I said, I started watching '85. Road Warriors were about their way out in the AWA and come to Jim Crockett. Uh, so it was on that decline a little bit. The AWA was, but I'm still going to check it out and probably do a video about that if you guys would like me to. And like I said, you guys just leave a like, subscribe, comment on the page. We'll talk some Memphis wrestling. Memphis wrestling is definitely one of my favorite promotions, one of my favorite shows to watch. That and Continental, UWF. And I don't know which ones they're going to have on here, but um, now I'm just like babbling. Maybe that's why I'll call this show. What do you guys think? Babbling about the good old days. Y'all might dig that. Anyway, you, you folks take it easy, and I'll see y'all next time.